Welcome to the First Coast Convos on the Coast, your go-to source for insights, trends, and strategies shaping Northeast Florida multifamily housing market. I'm your host, Kate Schermerhorn, and together we're going to explore what's driving success in the multifamily sector. Today's episode is being broadcast from the beautiful Sky Lounge at the Seattle Apartments. I'm joined today by Johmichael Fernandez and Michael Hodges, and we will explore local and state legislative issues that are and will be impacting the First Coast multifamily industry. So let's introduce our guest today. Joining me first is Johmichael Fernandez. He is the Director of Government Affairs for the Florida Apartment Association. Johmichael started his career at the Orange County Bar Association and the Osceola County Association of Realtors. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Central Florida. Is that the Black Knights?
Just the Knights.
The Golden Knights. Okay. Serving as the integral member of the Florida Apartment Association, Johmichael wears multiple hats. He plays a pivotal role in devising and executing government affairs strategies for various local affiliates, including, of course, the First Coast Apartment Association. Johmichael represents the association in meetings with elected officials, leveraging his expertise to champion specific policy goals favoring the multifamily marketplace in the glorious Sunshine State. Welcome, Johmichael Fernandez.
Thank you, Kate. Happy to be here.
Joining me also is Michael Hodges. Michael has worked in property management since 1990. Beginning in 2005, he purchased a small firm with 112 accounts and grew it to more than 400, known as FPM Communities. Michael is actively serving in the National Apartment Association, Florida Apartment Association, the First Coast Apartment Association, and the National Association of Residential Property Managers. He serves as a key contact for our local representatives, Aaron Bean and John Rutherford. Michael helped with the Emotional Support Animal Bill passed in Florida 3 years ago and the exemption bill that eliminated rent control in Florida, as well as most recently helped with the electronic notice bill that begins July 1 of this year, which we will get into some of those issues later. Welcome, Michael Hodges.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off today, if we don't mind. A lot of people, we talk about legislative issues, we talk about things that are happening in the local governments and the state governments, but for most people, the average person in the multifamily community, they're not paying a lot of attention to things that are going on in government affairs. So let's start with just talking about why should the average person in the multifamily industry pay attention to legislative issues?
Yeah, I think you reading Michael's bio alone tells you how many things he's been involved in the last, I think that was maybe 2 years. So, the work that our members do, on the ground, whether that's in Tallahassee or Jacksonville or anywhere else in the state, it really pays off. It pays off meeting with your legislators when you can. It pays off just going to our government affairs committee meetings, just learning and joining us and, speaking our industry's beliefs at a city council meeting, like what me and Michael did about a month ago.
Yeah.
City of Jacksonville. So
right.
Getting involved, it pays off. And you can see alone, again, with Michael's bio, how those things pay off very easily.
Yeah, I would just add that if you're not participating, then you allow other parties to control your livelihood and your industry. Who are the experts in our industry? First Coast Apartment Association, Florida Apartment Association, National Apartment Association. So when those key contacts to our legislative people are needed, we need to be the ones that they call. So that's the reason I got involved probably in this 20 years ago. And it's not that hard.
It's not that hard and very important. I think there's a lot of people that think of legislative issues and things as much more higher level than what they're used to on their day-to-day world. And I think if they just take a step and get involved, they'll find that there's a lot of important things that will matter to them as well.
And Kate, if I can, I think that's a really great point. Because even myself, when I first started in this role, working with elected officials, going to Tallahassee, meeting the mayor of whatever town it is that day, you think of them of almost like, a deity, or like unhuman,
right.
godlike, but they are just humans.
Yeah.
They have a family at home. They wake up in the morning, go to bed at night. They're just like everyone else, but they have a responsibility larger. They're an elected official. So, working with a lot of our members on the local side of things, they're nervous to get involved because of that. They're scared of the unknown, how someone's going to react to what they say or what they do. But that's what we're here for. We're here to support everyone.
And I found that too the first time I went to Impact Days at FAA. I didn't know what I was talking to. I didn't know who I was talking to. I felt very elementary in what I was speaking to and the issues. And the more you go and the more you get involved, the more you understand what's going on and how that they are just people and that they have regular jobs, so like the rest of us too. So speaking of FAA and legislative days, there was a lot of issues that we talked about going into this last year's legislative session. There was some laws that we talked about that were one of them specifically that's going into effect in July. What were some of the issues that we came to our legislators in Tallahassee with, and which ones of those look like they're going to be enacting in either coming up in July or on the verge of being enacted?
Yeah, so we had quite a few. Technically, we had 4 priorities, but we really focused on 3. One of the largest ones is the Live Local Act. Again, trying to revitalize it, make it better, tweak the things that we have learned over the past 2 years since its passage in 2023 to really find out how to make things better, not just for the industry, but for the residents of Florida that are dealing with affordability challenges, but even future residents. Because, I think we hear the phrase every now and again, 1,000 people move to Florida a week or whatever it is. And we have to prepare for that because, I always like to say in my meetings with local elected officials, it's like, we understand that not everyone's happy with the development, but we're a victim of our own success. I mean, you have beaches on both sides of the coast. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live, and people are going to come here because of that, because it's who doesn't want to live in Florida? But anyways, so those are the people that we're fighting for with the Live Local Act, making it better, as well as, like you already mentioned, the notice, electronic notices. So it actually goes into effect July 1st, which is really exciting, signed by the governor. Actually, one of the first bills this year that was signed by the governor. We could probably get into the actual legislative session a little bit later, because that's you can do a whole other podcast on just this session.
That's right.
But another priority that passed this year was that, signed by the governor, and it was a great success because now our members and the entire industry, they can now, both residents and the property provider or housing providers can now go ahead and opt into electronic notices, which is a great success for us.
If I can get Michael just to talk just very briefly, since you were actively involved in that,
Right.
Give us the layman's term of what that bill was and does for us.
What that bill really does for us is to makes our job more productive, and it keeps us safer, because of the 2 big things that in the modern world is everything's done electronically. In the old world, we have to go physically deliver a notice, all right, or we have to certify a security deposit notice. This allows us, as long as the tenant opts in, that we can do everything based on the email notice, and it makes everything just a lot easier, and then you're more productive. And at the same time, safer. That's just basically what it comes down to. So
I found when I was talking to the legislators that we met with, they didn't even realize they couldn't do that. Right. All those notices had to be filed by paper, by hand, and I couldn't believe not one person that I met understood that they were not allowed. The departments were not allowed to do electronic notices like that. So it seemed like it was a fairly no-nonsense bill to pass.
Yep.
Didn't get a lot of opposition.
Yeah, both sides actually thought that. I mean, everybody thought it was already being done, which in effect it was being done. It just wasn't being done in basically a formal way that was allowable. So as a process, you may go ahead and email that notice or 3-day notice, but you still had to follow it up with a notice on the door and knock on that door and then go away. So it allows a lot, and everybody thought we were doing it that way, but we weren't from a legal standpoint. So that's why it had to be passed. And that's why I think both sides said, yes, let's go for it.
Great.
Yeah. And that's a great point that you made, Kate. Like, the legislators didn't even know that was an issue, right? So that's, again, the point of us going up there, taking our time in Tallahassee, is to inform them of the issues. Because if, Michael was kind of alluding to this, I think, earlier, but if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. So if we don't get these things done on our own, we're going to be on the menu for sure.
Right.
So that's
Writing
the
that
important
down.
piece.
I'm stealing that for you.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and that's really the purpose of us going to things like legislative days, because there are so many agendas that absolutely the legislators can't possibly know all the issues that are going on in the state, and they're flooded with lobbyists every single day. So just to be able to make a small impact on one or two issues a year, I think makes a big difference for our industry for sure. Speaking of how things have changed, we're looking at, you were talking about all the population growth. I mean, certainly Jacksonville has had, and Northeast Florida has had a massive population growth over the many years. The last 10 years, consistently increased growth. How would you say the legislative landscape over the last couple of years has changed in relation to multifamily property owners and developers, and how has the legislatures responded to those things?
Well, from a state level perspective, and Johmichael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the last 5 years it's been pretty positive for our industry. We've actually, if you go back and look since 2020, we've actually were able to get a lot of things done legislatively that we may not have been able to get done 10 years before that or 5 years.
Why do you think that changes?
I think that changes based on who's basically running the state government or your local government. Depends on what their beliefs are. I mean, if you're in a capitalistic society like we are, then we're going to be looking at what is fair for all parties, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we can turn a profit. And if we can't turn that profit, we're definitely not going to be in business. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
That's very true. And I think, Michael was talking about that 5-year period from 2020 to now. I had the pleasure of starting with FAA in September of 2021. So I got to see a lot of that growth. And I got to be a part of a government affairs team led by Amanda White, our VP. It's just phenomenal, right? I've grown as a person, but also in my own role very much since then. I mean, 2023, I think, since I've started, was probably the most important year that we had, government affairs-wise. We had the preemption of rent control, because in 2022, if you remember, Orange County passed an illegal rent control ordinance. We won at the appellate court level, and actually, we actually just finally won attorney's fees against them just last week in 2025, for a lawsuit that was filed in 2022. So that has finally come to an end, but rent control was preempted. We had the passage of the Live Local Act, which was huge, omnibus bill for housing and affordability. It included property tax discounts for affordable and workforce housing. And it now allows, developers to come in and build on mixed-use commercial or industrial land as long as they set aside a certain amount of housing for, I believe it's 80% AMI or what have you. I can't remember the exact number, but before that, we had nothing. We had nothing incentivizing the creation of affordable and workforce housing. So that was a great success. We also preempted the landlord-tenant relationship in 2023. So if you remember, in 2023, before that, every local government had their own tenant bill of rights, or they had their own version of notices. So you would have to have a 30-day notice on a 30-day lease, month to month. So we remember that was tumultuous time. We had little fiefdoms across the state choosing what they want to do. And the Florida Apartment Association came in and worked with our partners in the legislature and said, we need to put a stop to this. We need to have continuity across the state for landlord-tenant law. And we did that. And that's not a royal we, right? So that's just the government affairs team. That's our members who went to Tallahassee. Even on the local side, fighting against the Orange County rent control ordinance. St. Pete was trying it. South Florida, basically all of Miami-Dade was trying it. So it was definitely an industry-wide effort to get those things passed. And that was just 1 year.
Right. I want to just add to that, when all that was occurring, when you're going over and talking to your representatives, they didn't even realize how bad it was until we get over there and explain to them what is really happening on a local level and all the items that were happening. They said, oh, wow, that's new to me. So we were over there explaining everything and educating them on what was going on out there in the state and in the counties and the cities. So without us being there, who knows what would have happened.
What do you think is one of the biggest issues facing Duval County specifically?
Well, I think we're still facing an affordability issue, simply because it's a supply and demand, So we're seeing, a lot of luxury come out of the ground still. But with the Live Local Act, I think we're slowly starting to see the building of affordable and workforce housing in a mixed use or mixed income developments. But I think, we still need to open up some of the development, things that are holding back.
I'm going to break that down just
Okay.
in another question, because I think a lot of people hear the word affordable and they think Section 8.
Yeah.
And that's all they think is when you hear the word affordable housing, they're thinking Section 8. Can you break down, when you're talking about the Live Local Act and affordable housing and workforce housing, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so that is a loaded question, Kate. So I'll try my
welcome.
best, right? So this is something that we have to, talk to legislators about, right? It's like when you go to a legislator and they hear affordable, they're like, "Oh, I don't want that in my backyard.
Right.
NIMBY, I don't want that in my backyard." But I've in my position going, representing over half the state with our local affiliates. I've been able to visit properties with legislators and local elected officials. And it's like, yeah, this is an affordable housing community, but it has a bowling alley or a golf simulator or a cinema, So they think of, like you said, like the projects like Section 8 housing or vouchers only. It's not that. Affordable and workforce housing is really, 80% to 120% AMI, area median income, depending on where you live, the MSA that you live, metropolitan statistical area, I should say, MSA. Right. So it really depends on that. But, you get even to the more, critical, low income, very low income, that's 80% AMI and below, you're 60 to 30% AMI. So again, if you're in Collier County, that's probably $70,000 for 80 to 120% AMI. But if you're in Duval, it's going to be a different number than it is for Miami-Dade. So it really depends on where you are in the state. So,
Yeah.
Well, where would you say that you were talking earlier about rent controls and landlords and protections? Where would you consider kind of the middle ground for the balance between protecting the tenant and the property owner's interest? Because as you say, if you're owning properties, you're not trying to do it for free. You're trying to, you are trying to make money in the profit, but somewhere in the balance, there's a difference between gouging tenants and protecting ownership. From an ownership perspective, where do you find that balance of what or what's your take on the whole on rent control, which?
Well, rent control is a different issue almost. Rent control, basically, as an example, rent control. When you have rent control in place, like we'll say New York, there was a small apartment community that just sold on a foreclosure for $175,000, and it was probably like 25 or 30 units, $175,000, and because of rent control, they were never able to raise the rent because those tenants were there basically permanently. Therefore, they could never maintain it properly. Could never, if you think about a 10-year-old building, a 15-year-old building, you may have to start thinking about remodeling, upgrading that, and weren't able to put that in. So if you can't put this money in, and you can't make it, it's going back to the bank, and that's basically what happened. And I don't know who ended up buying it, if anybody, but on the surface, $175,000 for 30 units, that's pretty good deal. So, but and that's on the rent control side. But Johmichael, you take over from there.
yeah, well, I think we tried to address that with the preemption of the landlord-tenant relationship, right? Because we wanted, and by we, I think the industry, I mean the industry, right? So we try to get some continuity, because if you were going to, rent in Jacksonville, drive down to, let's say, Orange County, where they had a tenant bill of rights, you're going to have different variations of landlord-tenant law. So we really tried to wipe it clean and just make sure that it's back to the state, and that everyone across the state now has to follow the same laws. And I believe in that bill, we did increase some of the notice requirements. I can't remember off the top of my head. I apologize, but so we did try to make it a little better for the residents on the notice side of things, because that was something that the opposition was requesting, and we said absolutely, that's something we can definitely work on, because we're not in the business or the industry, is not in the business of evicting people. They're not in the business of, price gouging or anything. This industry is in the business to give people a home,
Correct.
give people a place to stay, and I can, even from COVID, I remember the stories of our communities, working with their residents, setting up computer labs to help them with their unemployment applications and working with them on the rent assistance from the state and from local government. So I feel like during that time, we really got to see the best of what this industry is, because of the residents and the housing providers were really able to work together in such a time of need.
I think that's such an important point that a lot of people miss is these are apartment communities. These are people's homes, whether you own them directly or you're renting them. They're people's homes, and we're providing as an industry places for people to live, whether it's affordable or luxury. It's people's homes, and I think that's an important thing that a lot of people miss. And as landlords, people have to maintain properties, and so you can't, with the cost of living of everything goes up, prices go up, you can't still be paying 1972 rents.
Right.
So I think that's a piece that I think a lot of people don't raise my rent, but there's reasons that things have to go up for those because the cost of living in general goes up.
Whether it's property taxes, insurance, those have really hit hard. And look, if we don't have our residents, we don't have any way to provide. We're not in business. We want our residents to be happy. I can tell you on a personal level, one of the things that we strive to do is we're going to follow the law. Some of the stuff that the Tenant Bill of Rights is basically already in law. It's already in statute, so it's not being followed. So we have to educate, number one, all our residents, our basically government officials, as to what is out there. We just have to continue to do that. And, basically for Apartment Association, First Coast Apartment Association, we're doing a great job doing it, and we're continuing to move that. As Johmichael said, when Amanda took over, and I've been involved in a lot of associations, and when she took over and pretty much guided us where we are today, we are light years ahead of where we were. So, but we ultimately want to provide good housing, clean housing for our residents. And if that's the case, getting back to the point I was going to make, we have increased our residency to over 4.2 years. That's our average person that stays with us. But if you're in that length of time, that means that you're doing something right, because otherwise you'd have complete turnover, and you don't want complete turnover in your property. You got to have there's a percentage point of what you need to do. So that's what we're trying to do.
Fantastic. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to FCAA's Convos on the Coast. We are broadcasting live from the beautiful Sky Lounge in the CL Apartments. Joining me today is Johmichael Fernandez and Michael Hodges. And getting back into some of the things that we were talking about, what do you think, besides the Live Local, which has had a major impact on the affordability of housing markets, what other legislation can you see coming down the pike that would help support the development of affordable housing, multifamily housing, without discouraging private investment? Because I think the Live Local has a lot to do with tax incentives. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes, tax discounts. Yes.
What other things do you see either could or might be coming down the pipeline with legislators to help with that affordability factor and encourage the investors?
So, on a level here in Jacksonville, one of the things and on a state level, so we have to decide, I think, from zoning perspective. Okay, zoning is big in the permitting process. Some of that is really out of control. That's an example. To get a septic tank system in one property that I personally own, it took the city of Jacksonville over 6 months to get that permit done. It wasn't about the vendor doing the job. It was about the city of Jacksonville not doing anything about it to get it done. Well, think about 6 months period of time in a major project, 200, 400 units. That's a lot of money, a lot of time wasted. But so zoning, I think we're going to have to come to a conversation, maybe a decision as to, do we need to do something on a state level or local level? Because one of the big things you're going to find out there is this local going to be controlled or is it going to be state controlled? So we got to figure out what we need to do with that zoning and permitting. And maybe we can put something in on the state level on the permitting or zoning side. I don't know exactly what that, I don't have that answer, but I know we probably need to work on that.
Now, I think even in this legislative session, there was a few things about like the timeline of permitting on certain things. So, local governments, as they do best, try to drag their feet on some things, and so it makes development harder, right? So if you can build something 6 months faster, get that out the door, delivered, you're going to be recouping your costs a lot sooner. But I think another issue, I don't know if it exactly answers your question, Kate, so I apologize, but impact fees. So I think impact fees are a huge burden right now. And the legislature, they have tried in the past to address the issue. Right now, a local government would have to, phase in the impact fees over a certain amount of years, with like 25% increase over 4 years. But they can use this little thing called extenuating circumstances and claim, almost anything, and they can, rush the impact fees, within 90 days. So that's an issue that we're probably going to look at more closely in the next legislative session or two. I know, again, from my perspective on the local side, I get those notices in my email. This county is raising impact fees. This city is raising impact fees. And so I think that's, again, people don't usually think of impact fees as a tax, but it definitely is. And it's something that I think we can hopefully address soon.
Well, we've talked a lot about state regulations and meeting with state legislators, but it sounds like there's a lot of things that are going on the local level that are better addressed. So how would somebody get involved, find the city council people? How would they get involved more locally to impact those local regulations that the state legislatures don't control, but those local city councils do? How would they best find those avenues to get involved?
Yeah, I think, send me an email. My email is Johmichael, JOHNMICHAEL @FAAHQ.org. Send me an email. That's what I'm here for. Join our government affairs committee. We try to have one at least once a quarter to just inform the members, keep them up to date on certain things. Just last month, like I already mentioned, 3 of us in the room, Michael and Jim off to the corner there, we were all in City Hall of Jacksonville fighting against a landlord registry that one of the council members filed. And so just getting involved in the government affairs committee, sending me an email saying, hey, is there anything I should be aware of? If there's anything you think that we should be aware of, I am not a perfect being. Things unfortunately can fall through the cracks. Let me know if you think there's an issue, whether it's an inspection issue that you had, or, whether it's building or fire, or you're a developer who's having issues. Let us know, because these are how things get, they bubble up, they come to me, and then I, cross the hall in my office to Amanda and say, hey, this might be a good idea for next legislative session to address, X, Y, and Z. So absolutely.
And what do you see coming in the next 12 to 24 months coming up in agendas or with the legislatures, local or state level?
Well, one thing on the local level will definitely be the landlord registry. That is coming. There is a bill coming out on that. So Johmichael's on top of that along with Jim. So as soon as you see anything from them, we need to be involved, because any of those kind of things that are coming on what we call housing issue, there's a committee that they have down there, but when they file the bill, they don't have to necessarily come out of the committee. It can come straight from a city council person. So we need to be there so that we can educate. And just because you don't know the ins and outs, because I can tell you, I don't know, Johmichael knows this stuff inside and out. I don't. I know probably I might know 1% of what Johmichael knows, but, but I
doubt
do
that,
know,
Michael. I doubt it.
Yeah. No, it's true. Because, one thing that people don't realize, it's not what you know. It's just a matter of you showing up. You show up, and that's where these people, when the city council says, because one of the things that Councilman Miller told me after our meeting the landlord registry, he said, "Good showing, good job," because without that showing, then maybe they wouldn't be maybe they'll pass it that night, and then we're going to start with an ordinance after that. What we're trying to do is try to educate them right before any of that stuff gets started. So as soon as you hear that, we need a call to action. And it doesn't matter if you know the issue inside and out. It's not that, because I can tell you I don't. I just know that when you show up, you introduce yourself, and they know that you're part of their council or their district, then they're going to pay attention to you. I mean, I'm not saying this because it's Johmichael, but Johmichael is not in the district. Therefore, they want to see somebody from the district, right, that they're in, whether it's my councilman is Joe Boyer. Is that right? No, excuse me.
Michael Boylan?
No, Michael Boylan is my counsel for work.
Oh, okay.
But for the resident, it's God.
By the way, for those listening, there's
it's
19
Carlucci.
council members in Jacksonville.
That's right.
So there's quite a bit.
Yeah, so when you look at a vote, you're always wanting to make sure that you get the 10, because that's what you need to make sure you pass or not pass any legislation. Yeah, but it's Carlucci is my personal one. So, and he happens to be the chair of basically the Affordable Housing Committee for the city of Jacksonville. So it's important that we show up. So, and it's not about what you know. It's a matter of you showing up. All the education and all the technical stuff, Johmichael will be able to do that for you. I mean, he'll educate everybody. So he's the one that helps us get in the right position.
Well, I think that's the key to everything we've heard is to be involved, to be active, to learn. If you don't know, find it. I think there's a lot of resources on our First Coast Apartment Association website. There's a lot of resources on the Florida Apartment Association website. And I think the biggest takeaway is that all of these things in the legislative affect everybody, whether you're involved in politics or not. The things that our legislators locally and statewide and nationally are doing are affecting us one way or another. And so we need to be informed, we need to be educated, and we need to inform them of the things that as we've talked about, they may not actually know the issues. And so if we're in front of them and talking them and expressing those issues, that's informing them as much as we're informing ourselves of the issues.
Right, and one of the things I want to bring up too, Johmichael and I actually went ahead and we met with Representative Kendall out of St. Johns County. We didn't know her. I didn't know her. Johmichael didn't know her, but we set up the meeting. And from whether or not they agree with everything you say, they will listen to you because you've actually reached out to them. And we met with her. And so now we have somebody that we can at least talk with to see if we need any kind of action or, whatever it might be. So that's as simple as picking up the phone and making an appointment. And that's all you have to do.
Absolutely.
We couldn't do what we do on the legislative level, like Johmichael, Amanda, and the Florida Apartment Association without funds. APAC is important, and that's why every member should, at just a $25, $35 level, invest. And if you do that, we can continue to represent the industry and do what we need to do to win and educate our representatives.
And Michael, just for that, I'm going to say to the next president that you should have another term as APAC chair for that shameless plug. I love it. I didn't have to do it. It came from you. It was great. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Johmichael Fernandez and Michael Hodges for joining us today. This has been Convos on the Coast. Get involved, have fun, let's go make a splash, but stick around for the next Maintenance Minute.
Hey everybody, Chris Polk here with Highmark Residential to give you your Maintenance Minute. Here are some essential pool safety tips to help ensure everyone enjoys the water safely. First, check your pool chemicals daily and make sure that we keep a correct log of them. Make sure to check your gates. They latch, lock, and shut automatically. Inspect the pool deck for any broken or sharp edges, and check all of your safety equipment to make sure they are in place and in good working condition. And thank you for diving in today's Maintenance Minute.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Convos on the Coast. If you like what you heard, be sure to check out more episodes and ways to listen at FCAAonline.com. And while you're there, don't forget to register for our big trade show, Multifamily Game Show Showdown, happening July 16th. We'll see you next time for a conversation all about time management. Talk soon.